Welcome back to ConFusion, Still Confusing, a virtual component of ConFusion, a science fiction and fantasy convention in Novi, Michigan. You can find the 2027 cons information at 2027.confusionsf.org. Today we have a discussion on speculative poetry by Jennifer Hudak and Jenna Hanchey.
Hi, Jenna.
Hi, Jen. I'm
We are
excited.
here. We are here today to talk about poetry. And I think both of us came to at least speculative poetry from prose. So we're going to talk especially about how writing poetry kind of intersects with the other types of writing that we do.
And with other types of perhaps creative work that we do.
Absolutely. We
Jen,
should
do you want to
introduce
introduce
ourselves
yourself?
first. Yes, you go first, Jenna.
Hi, everybody. I am Jenna Hanchey. Thanks so much for joining us to talk about poetry today. I am a speculative fiction writer. My fiction has been nominated for and shortlisted for the British Science Fiction Awards, and some other fiction that I've had the pleasure to narrate the audio for has been shortlisted for the Audio British Science Fiction Awards. And so I'm a fiction writer, poet, audio narrator, podcast co-host. My day job is a professor, and I study decolonial speculative fiction, and particularly African speculative fiction and the ways that it breaks Western ideas of development in futurity. And yeah, that's enough about me.
You
Jen.
do all the things, basically. Every single one of the things. I am Jennifer Hudak. I am also a speculative fiction writer. My fiction in particular is in places like Lightspeed, Strange Horizons, Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy. I am
Why you
a
say that like it's nothing? Oh yeah, just Lightspeed, Strange Horizons.
Believe me,
Best
I
American
scream
Science
inside
Fiction.
every time I say it. Yeah. I'm a Nebula finalist, Nebula Award finalist. Last year I was a finalist in fiction. This year I'm a finalist for Best Poem. The
Woo!
first ever Nebula Award for Best Poem. So that's very exciting. In my day job, I am a yoga and movement teacher. And if you ever want to hear me talk about the myth of bad posture, just hit me up. I'm really happy to talk about it. Um, yeah, that's me. I don't have as exciting an intro as Jenna, but
That was amazing. I love, like, this is probably going to spin off on the internet as like, contact Jen about bad posture. It's not a thing.
it's not a thing. It's really not a thing.
So Jen, how did you come to poetry?
So, like I'm sure a lot of people watching this, I wrote my share of angsty poems in both high school and college.
I
Um,
didn't realize we were going there. I did as
oh,
well. Oh
it's
no.
okay. We don't have to talk about it. We're not going to read it. We're not going to bring it up. But all of which is to say that I, other than that, I came to poetry very recently. So, other than a few things that I'd scribbled down here and there, when I started writing for publication around 2017, I focused on fiction and I just didn't write poetry at all. And then a little over a year ago, I had a real, I don't know, just a rough time with what I was writing because of, the world and everything. It was just a hard time. I got in my head a little bit. And so, as it happened in a group that I'm part of, the Codex Writers Group, there was a poetry challenge coming up. And I decided to join this challenge because I wanted to just be able to play with language in a way that I feel like I hadn't been able to do for a while. I was thinking a lot about publication, a lot about final product, and I just wanted to be able to mess around with it and play. And I really loved it, and I really love speculative poetry in particular. I yeah, I don't think I write poetry as much as I write prose, but I really enjoy doing it.
That's interesting. Like I think came to poetry in our recent, like there was the era of high school poetry,
We all have
um,
it.
angsty stuff. And
Yeah.
then I think I came to poetry more recently in speculative fiction as again a means like you did of playing with language and um particularly I wanted to be writing in a space where I wasn't constantly distracted. So I got myself like this big leather notebook. I wish I had brought it over here. It's somewhere in it's somewhere in the house. But I got myself this big leather notebook that was pretty and then I wanted to just have the space to like write by hand in it. And most of my poems I write by hand. I can't do that with fiction just because I can't like hold I move too many things around. I change too many things as I'm writing. But like when it's a short form thing, like a poem, I can cross things out right in the margins and use this written space as a way of playing with language, trying out different words without necessarily writing over the word that's there, but just like putting things in the margins. It gives me more space to like experiment with language. And so I started doing that partly because I wanted a space offline where I wasn't constantly distracted by things. And then also because I wanted to try writing poems again. I'm not sure of the timeline, but it might have been around when I got asked to be poetry editor at Orion's Belt magazine. When I was like, I don't think I'm a poet though. And Joshua Fagan, the current editor at the time, was like, well, because I had applied to be a fiction editor, and he was like, well, your fiction is very poetic, so I think you could be a poetry editor. And I was like, do I do poetry though? Is that what this is? I mean, people have told me my stories are all vibes, no plot. Maybe that's poetry when it's flash, which I think we'll get into
Hmm.
later. Like, what's the difference between prose poems and all vibes, no plot flash stories? Um, there isn't one. So
TLDR. Yeah.
yeah, so I started writing poetry to be like, well, I'm a poetry editor now. Maybe I need to practice this skill myself. And then last year, around March last year, one of my doctoral students that I work really closely with died very
Mhm.
suddenly. And I like was left in a spot where words just weren't coming. And so it doesn't sound like that would be a spot to play with poetry, but what I ended up doing was I have a lot of collaging stuff that I've just kind of collected from magazines for since college, really. And I ended up making a lot of poems as collages of both words and images in that space where I couldn't create words of my own. I could move these cutout words around to do something with them. And so I've since then been making a lot of hand cut paper collage poems as well.
And had them published.
And had them published. Yes. Julia Rios published the first one in Worlds of Possibility called After. And then I have one that is forthcoming in Strange Horizons.
Yes. I think it's so interesting that both of us kind of started or like started again with poetry when we were feeling kind of blocked with fiction. And I also love how you were talking about writing poetry longhand in your journal because I ended up doing the same thing. It seems almost like, especially since we had been writing fiction and you'd been writing academic fiction for a long time, um, I feel like sometimes um, it's harder for me to get messy with my fiction. And it's almost kind of fun to get a little messy with the creation of a poem.
Mhm.
Like making lines go off in different directions, arrows on the page, or even like literally like with you cutting things out and pasting them and moving them around. I think that's really uh cool, and that idea of just being able to kind of play with abandon with language is something that I really love about poetry, even when sometimes there are restrictions on poetry like form and meter that make it seem like it would be much more rigid than fiction.
Mhm.
Um, something about the structure. It's almost like when you give kids or pets or something, you give them boundaries and then they're not afraid to play a little bit. And I sort of feel like that sometimes with a poem. Like I have this boundary and then I can just kind of go to town within that
Yeah.
boundary. Where sometimes fiction feels like, oh my God, like I can do anything
The
here and
page is
it's a little
open.
bit scarier. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I find playing with form fun, and then most of the like, I don't know, I like having those boundaries too. It's interesting because 'cause I'm thinking about, like, the different ways that the writing tools that we have, on computers don't necessarily tend towards allowing you to play in those ways, that we're talking about. Like, I'm thinking about how, I think Microsoft Word will just erase a word to put the other word there, and, like, you could make a comment and leave things off to the side, but it's all focused on the final product more than it is, this process aspect that poetry lets you play with, in different ways. Um and I'm losing my train of thought, but there was something about oh no, Jen, I've lost it.
Don't worry, you'll get it back. I have
It's
faith in you.
8 AM and there's coffee and
But I agree with you, and I also like I was working on a concrete poem recently. So a concrete poem, for those who might not know, is when the words on the page are shaped in a certain they
yeah.
create a certain shape that also informs the poem itself. So the poem that I'm working on is like it's a contrapuntal poem, which is also it's like when you have two poems that can be read by themselves, but also you can read them straight across and they make a
Mhm.
third poem. And one of the poems was from the moon's perspective and one is from the earth's perspective. And so I have one that's shaped like a crescent moon, one that's shaped like an earth. And as I'm trying to type this out, uh oh my
Oh,
gosh, it
no.
was this huge disaster. I mean, like, I have like tabs and spaces, and then you have one word that's just slightly too long and everything goes on the next.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard in like word processing to do that.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about, like thank you. I was thinking about how form gives constraints. You're also in concrete poems reminding me of, one in Taco Bell Quarterly recently that was poem in the shape of the poet beating Henry Kissinger to death, which I
Oh,
just
right.
thank you, Taco Bell Quarterly, for the things that you give us. Um, but yeah, thinking about form too, like it's interesting how there's the form of the shape that you're talking about that can like give you a basis to work with. There's the ways of rhythm and meter and rhyming schemes that are different ways that can give things for people to play with. And then I'm thinking even about how the collage forms that I do, the background that I choose sets like how big it's going to be, what size words I'm going to use,
Mm.
and then like I have these constraints built in with like what words do I have that I've cut out that are available? What images do I have to go with that? How do the colors look? Because I'm also then playing with like visual media as well as words. But that those yeah give you something to play with that allows you to focus on that process of play within, perhaps more than um, yeah, and it also, like, lets you focus really intimately on language in a way that I think
Absolutely.
sometimes our fiction writing can get, like, heavily focused on plot or heavily focused on character or heavily focused on, like, is there enough tension to keep the story going? But,
Is it
um,
a story?
is it a
I
story? Is
get
it
that
a
sometimes.
story?
Yeah.
Is this really a
Yeah.
story? It is if
Yeah.
I say it is. Thank you. Um But I'm thinking about, like, the way that poetry gives access to something that I don't know, I've recently found, um, can be something that publishing is not as focused on. I'm in particularly thinking of longer form fiction here. I guess when everything is driven by like book talk reviews, we get a lot of books that are marketed to us at least as like this trope meets that trope meets this action movie. When what I really want to know is like, does the language support the like complexity and intimacy of the plot and character development? And it's really lovely to stumble on books that have that like regard for the beauty of language at the same time as these other aspects that I think tend to get more heavily focused on in recent publishing, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, it's language is a layer like anything else that kind of carries meaning. I mean, it carries the meaning of the words, but the use of language itself can add another layer of meaning or depth or complexity to a work. And when you're just focusing on tropes or whatever, um, it's easy to forget that. Because I even like what they call window pane fiction, which is like, oh, you don't even or window pane prose, where you don't even notice the language, right? All you notice is even that's a choice. Like
Yeah.
that is a choice that a writer makes
And
to
can be done
try to
well
make.
or poorly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that, yeah, one of the things that working on poetry had done to my fiction was make me think. I think sometimes in fiction, because I do tend to write pretty lyrical fiction, but I sometimes do it without really thinking about it.
Mhm.
And this made me really think about it. Like, what's the rhythm of my prose?
Mm.
What is the sound of the words that I'm using? How does it flow together or not flow together? And even like space on a page, which poetry makes you think about, line breaks and how things are kind of divided up on the page. You start to think about that a little bit more with prose when you've been writing poetry, which I think is really, I mean, I think it's a great thing for all prose readers to do, is to, even if you don't want to write poetry, is just read it, because
Yeah.
it kind of like just shifts things slightly in your brain. I feel like.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot more about, I think, rhythm and space and what that does in reading poetry recently. You've also got me thinking about like when we're talking about poetry and rhythm, something that like LP Kindred brings up a lot is that um, meters are such a Western
Mm,
thing in poetry as a like particularly in thinking about the kind of iambic pentameter way of thinking about where you put emphasis. And
mhm,
LP always reminds everybody like not everybody puts emphasis on the same syllables depending on like cultural, ways of pronouncing things. And you can't always tell that from a page.
mhm,
So I think also thinking about the sound aspect in relation to rhythm, that these aren't just things, words on a page, but are
mm,
living and breathing in bodies, and what that means for how it flows, is something that I've found more readily available in poetry because I will pause, I'll read poems out loud and not just
yes.
keep it, going through my head. But the sound quality is so important to that as well.
Yeah,
Um,
poetries are really meant to be read aloud and appreciated aloud. And I love that what you were saying, LP Kindred said, because I was talking with some people too about some languages do not have stressed and unstressed syllables.
yeah,
It's just all you emphasize things in a different way than
yeah,
with stress or not stress. So yeah, that kind of thing is fun to play around with. Like it's like a fun tool, like if you want to write an iambic pentameter or whatever. But it's not the only tool that you
it,
can use.
yeah. It's a fun tool. It's something I like it when they're used as tools rather than restrictions on people's work,
Yeah. Oh, that's a
right? Like,
great way to say it. Yeah.
yeah, like a way of producing something, giving you boundaries that are generative for you. Um, instead of, sorry, a quote is coming to my head from Alexis Pauline Gumbs, who I've been planning to talk about anyway. But in her book, Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons for Marine Mammals, which she's talking
Which
about.
I just ordered, by the way.
So good.
Because you recommended it.
She's a poet, but this book is prose, but it's poetry, but it's poetic. So we'll talk about genre blending here in a sec, but like one of her quotes in there is thinking about like the way that some marine mammals live and asking what the difference is between destructive borders and generative boundaries. So I think that like form can be used as a generative boundary for people, and it can also be used as a destructive border, depending on like how people's work is then read, I guess, by others. So
I love that distinction. That's a really, really cool distinction.
it comes to mind all the time in like so many different
Yeah.
circumstances. Is this a generative boundary or a destructive border?
But you were saying in there too about the kind of overlap between prose and poetry. Like
Yeah.
when is something prose and when is something poetry, and yeah, like obviously I agree with you. There really is no difference. I feel like it's like any genre difference, that some of it has to do more with marketing than anything else.
So how do you decide where to send your stuff, Jen, when it's in the in-between spot?
That is such a great question, because I feel like, particularly with my poem The World to Come, I tried to write that as fiction so many times.
Oh, wait, everyone. This is the poem in Strange Horizons that is nominated for a nebula. Nominated for a nebula.
This is the Nebula nominated poem. But yes, I tried to write it as fiction so many times. And I couldn't make it work. I didn't know how to write it as fiction in a way that didn't minimize what I was saying or force it to say something. And I felt like writing it as poetry, even though I used some of the same words that I would have used had it been fiction, and some of the same even sentences, I felt like the poem allowed it to be a distillation of um, a distillation of both emotion and meaning, um, in a way that I don't think I could have made it prose. That being said, I have published my share of flash pieces that probably, I'm thinking of like Carolyn Forche, her prose poem The General, which is not new. It came out a very long time ago, but that could be a flash piece. It's in a book as a prose poem, and I feel like I have written several flash pieces that could be either, depending on who's reading it and where it appears. Yeah. Yeah. And so I feel like sometimes the distinction is clear to me. And sometimes it's not so clear. Sometimes I feel like I set out writing something as fiction. It doesn't have a plot. It's definitely focused a lot more on language than anything else. So that The Tide Folk, which is a story of mine which came out in Lightspeed this month, is very much like that. It's like I wrote it right after I had done this first poetry contest, and I was focusing almost entirely just on the sound of the language, trying to get the sound of the language to bring to mind the place that I was writing about. And so my answer is I don't know in terms of like how you might with those kind of fringe kind of areas. I have no idea how one decides.
I love how you connected language, the focus on language, to emotion and space to explore emotion. Because I think for me, that's also what makes something a little bit more poem shaped.
Mm-hmm.
Is that but then a lot of my flash does that too, is just a very deep focus on someone's emotional landscape and movement through a moment, in a way that like really focuses in on that aspect. And to me, like, I want to say that's plot, but magazines don't think that's plot. And many readers might not think that's plot. But to me, I'm like, this is a significant emotional shift
It's a
that
movement,
happens
yes.
like completely within this character's like consciousness in this moment of like maybe holding a coffee cup. But like, I don't know, for me, like those moments of self, like transformation of mindset, perspective shift, shift in like that moment when an emotional turmoil turns into some kind of sense making is something that I think is really important for me, and like something I like to work through with my fiction and inside with my fiction. And so that's, I think, sometimes where things become poem shaped for me is when like I can't uh well, when this thing emerges where I'm like, you be poem, you be flash piece. I'm not really sure. Let's see what the magazines say. And
Yeah.
there's one in particular that I absolutely adore of mine that nobody wants. I can't
We all
figure out,
have one of those. Yeah.
like um it's this moment where the like, can I talk about things that aren't published? I don't know. Is that cool? Is that a thing that we do?
I mean, I think you can. I just wouldn't like maybe read any of it because,
Okay, I won't read it, but
yeah.
like it's a kind of like collective consciousness of the ocean, and like thinking of like mermaids as an extension of that. And so then what happens to the collective consciousness of the ocean when like the little mermaid chooses to leave and is cut off
Oh.
from that collective consciousness, and how to, because I think, there's things like ancillary justice that deals with like when the one
Hmm.
becomes the only embodiment of the collective, but this is like what happens when the collective loses a piece, and is reckoning with that, and it's just that moment of reckoning, and that's it. And-
That's a really good point that like poems can do and flash can do, but I also really do feel like poems can do is hone in on one moment,
moment,
just
yeah.
one particular. I mean, and there is narrative poetry. I don't write narrative poetry as much, but um it is a thing. But I also feel like and how one decides to write narrative poetry and not flash, I'm not sure about that either. But I also do agree with you that poetry is so great at just kind of taking the one moment,
Mm-hmm.
which is hard to do in any other form.
Yeah. Well, Jen, I think we're reaching our time, so
We
it
are
might be good to wrap up with your favorite poetry recommendations for the people who
okay.
are watching this, as well as the typical, where can we find you on the internet and what is coming
Yes.
next for you?
So I want to recommend a book called Electric Arches by Eve L. Ewing, which is a book of poems and some prose-looking snippets, some of which are uh,
Mm.
typed, some of which are handwritten. Do you have a copy? I didn't bring my copy
I have
upstairs.
them behind it.
Um, and it is this incredible collection. There it is,
Hello,
Electric
everyone. I'm going to
Arches.
speak to make sure that this gets on the video.
Yes, Eve L. Ewing, Electric Arches. And it is this amazing book that the premise of the book is Eve L. Ewing says that, she's trying to write the future of Black Americans, that she wants to bring into existence with her words. And so she says it's not fiction. It is reality, the way that it's being written in there. It's fantastic. Everyone should read it cover to cover. And I am, again, Jennifer Hudak, uh, and I can be found on my website, jenniferhudackwrites.com. And I'm also sometimes on Blue Sky as at Jennifer Hudak. And really, that's about it for me on the internet.
Is there anything coming next for you?
So I have another poem that is going to be coming out, I think, this summer in Troll Breath, which is my witchy poem, which is kind of exciting. So that's what I have coming up next. And you, Jenna?
Hello, everyone. My poetic-ish recommendation, which is interesting because it's also kind of like mixing the poem and like reality, because this is M Archive, After the End of the World by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, and it is published with an academic press, but it is speculative poetry, but she calls it a speculative documentary. So it's a look back. If you've read Octavia's Brood, one of the chapters in Octavia's Brood that Alexis Pauline Gumbs wrote is very similar to the format of this book. So it's a speculative documentary looking back on a transformation out of this capitalist hellscape into a better world through Black feminist knowledge. And then I am Jenna Hanchey. Hi. I have a website. It is jennahanchey.com. And then you can find me sometimes on Blue Sky at Jenna Hanchey. And yeah.
What do you have coming up?
Oh my God. Yes, I do have a thing that is like going into press today, which means in a year or so it will be available. But I have just finished writing a book called Decolonial Dreamwork: African Futurism and Imagination Beyond Development. And that is going to be coming out hopefully in a year, knock on wood, with Ohio State University Press. And it is a kind of decolonial workbook using like analyzing African speculative fiction for ways that we can all learn to imagine different futures. So that's coming out. And then the other thing I'm very excited about is the poem that is coming out in Strange Horizons. That is a collage poem, and it is called Our Love is a Fiction Demanding to Be Future.
Ooh, what a great title. Wow. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. We probably could have gone for like an hour
It's
or
true.
more. But
Thank
this
you to
was really
everybody.
fun.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me, Jen. And thanks for
My
everybody who tuned in to listen.
Thank you very much to Jennifer and Jenna for this amazing discussion. Again, you can see more discussions like this at ConFusion in Novi, Michigan, and all of our information is at 2027.confusionsf.org.